Good morning, Brew Daily Show. I'm Neal Freyman.
And I'm Toby Howell.
Today, a Fed president takes us in the room where it happens.
Then the gym bros are coming for your pastries. Protein Pop-Tarts are now a thing. It's Thursday, October 16th. Let's ride.
Good morning. Today's show is going to be a little different, but in an exciting way. Yesterday, we spoke to Chicago Fed President Austan Goolsbee in this studio. Thank you for your questions, by the way. And while going in, we expected to use that interview for a part of the show. The conversation was so interesting, we kept the tape running and are going to bring you about 20 minutes of Austan, then wrap it up with some final news headlines, of course.
A couple of things stood out to me about this interview, Neal. First, Austan does not scream Fed official. His dream job was actually doing voiceovers for car commercials. Second, he's a data dog through and through. And I tell you what, the dog is hungry amidst the data blackout due to the government shutdown. And finally, it was so cool talking to a voter on the central bank's interest rate setting committee. Just wait until he talks about the size of the table they all sit around. One of our favorite interviews so far, so we hope you all enjoy.
And now a word from our sponsor, Remarkable. Toby, would you say you're an organized person?
You've seen my home.
Yeah, it's a nightmare. That's why you got to get the Remarkable Paper Pro. You can fit a practically unlimited number of notes and documents on this third-generation paper tablet, all organized into folders, tagged and searchable, so you can find what you need in seconds. It's a central location for all of your most important work. Templates like checklists and day planners help you stay organized.
This latest edition features the all-new canvas color display, built-in reading light, and class-leading responsiveness.
It's thin, minimalist, and designed to feel and sound just like writing on actual paper. But you can also turn your handwriting into typed text, use the reading light to work anytime, and structure your work with dozens of built-in templates.
And most importantly, Remarkable's mission is about helping you think better. That means no apps, social media, or any other distractions, just you and your thoughts. Whether you're in a meeting or deep in a creative session, this paper tablet helps you think better.
You can try Remarkable Paper Pro for 100 days for free. If it's not what you're looking for, get your money back. Visit remarkable.com to learn more and get your paper tablet today. That's remarkable.com.
And now, here's Austan.
Austan Goolsbee, thanks so much for being with us.
Yeah, what a treat. Thank you for having me.
This is going to be great. So it's Wednesday morning. You're a Federal Reserve official. You should be waist deep in the monthly inflation report that was supposed to be released today. But instead, you're here with us because the consumer price index was delayed from the government shutdown. And that is a problem because you and other Fed leaders are huddling up in 2 weeks to make an interest rate decision that will determine the fate of the economy. How is this data blackout impacting your ability to do your job? Do you have the information you need?
It's a mess. I mean, we always have to make a decision with imperfect information, but there's imperfect and then there's imperfect. If you don't have the information, it just adds more question marks, makes it harder to see.
And what is it like for you not having data at your fingertips? Because I remember you called yourself once a data dog.
Yeah, and I'm one of many. It's frustrating. I've tried not giving your dog food for the whole day and see how the dog reacts. You know, that's exactly how I feel.
And what did you mean by this? You said the first rule of the data dogs is there's a time for walking and a time for sniffing, and knowing the difference between those.
Yeah,
what is the difference between those?
What do you mean? What is the difference? Look, that's when you come to the FOMC meeting and it's deciding among the hardest things the central bank has to do is figure out when the transition moments are and try to get the timing right. And that's what that first rule of the data dogs is. Sometimes sniff for more information, and sometimes you have the information. It's time to start walking. The second rule of the data dogs is sniff every piece of data that hits the floor because it might be food. And times like this, where either A, you can't get the data, or B, even before there was a shutdown and they stopped sending the data, big tentpole important numbers like the monthly payroll jobs number have a bunch of question marks because A, the survey response rates have gone down, so we get bigger revisions now, and there's more corrections, and a bunch of other things are happening, like immigration policies changing, so the population growth is smaller. You got the baby boom in the heart of their retirement, and the speed at which that happens is going to affect the monthly payroll number. So go sniff everything. If it's actually a turning point, you should see it in a lot of different series, and so far you're not.
Well, talk to me about some of those other pieces of food laying on the ground. I'm thinking about the ADP private payroll providers report. Where are you looking if you don't have
Yeah.
the government data, or if it's not necessarily as reliable as it once was?
What I would encourage everyone to look at, if you're into this sort of thing, and I feel bad for you. If you're one of us and you're into this sort of thing, that says something about you. But if you are, just be careful with raw numbers, okay? Aggregate numbers, including the ADP, we saw in 2023 and 2024 were not accurate indicators of the business cycle. You'll remember there were people saying when we were getting these big jobs numbers, 180,000 a month, in 23, over 200,000 a month, there were people saying, you can't be this high, that's so far above the break-even point, we must be about to reignite inflation. But it didn't. Inflation didn't reignite. It kept coming down over that whole period. So the answer to your question of what to look at, I encourage you to look at rates. So 23 and 24, the unemployment rate, the vacancy rate, the hiring rate, the layoff rate, those were the four horsemen of the truth. They gave you a much better indicator where we were in the business cycle. They're a little bit of a mixed picture now. Some of them are worrying. The hiring rate is very low, and you see that in the data, and you see that in college graduates and new entrants to the workforce. Everyone complaining it's really hard to find a job. But the layoff rate is also really low, and it's just worth noting that's unusual. Usually, if the hiring rate is low, they start laying people off, and that's the sign that you're going into a recession. Now, the hiring rate looks like recession. The layoff rate looks like boom. And so you would think go sniff some other stuff. And now they're not giving us the data. So it's definitely frustrating.
It's tough. How much of the labor market weakness, especially in the entry-level sphere, do you attribute to AI? Is there any way of knowing? I mean, that's another confounding variable here that we have artificial intelligence sweeping the country and the globe. How much do you think it's impacting the labor market?
I don't think a ton. I think on a sector-by-sector basis, the fact that the unemployment rate of computer science graduates went from being the lowest of all the majors to now among the highest of all the majors, there's probably something to that. But objectively, the unemployment rate of computer science graduates remains pretty low. AI, the things that AI is replacing so far are nowhere near the majority of the job market. Not even close. It's a edge case. So I don't think that the AI explains the hiring rate for the whole nation.
Just holistically, one term we've used to describe this labor market is low hire, low fire. Is that something that you would agree with?
Is that two terms or one term?
I guess it's a phrase.
Yeah, I totally 100% agree with that phrase. And just look at the data. It's low hiring, low firing environment. This low turnover is unusual. That's an unusual environment to be in. Before we got to this, everybody would say, there's so much uncertainty. It gives everyone pause. You would kind of think if you were running a business and there was a lot of uncertainty, you wouldn't want to get rid of the people you have. It's hard to bring them back, but you wouldn't be bringing on new people. You'd just be kind of waiting it out. So that might be contributing to that environment.
So data dogs, they look at all types of data, like qualitative data and quantitative data. And part of your job is talking to business leaders. You're the president of Chicago Fed in the Midwest. So what are you hearing from them as you go talk to business leaders across the Midwest?
Running April 2nd came Liberation Day. They announced the tariffs. The district of the 7th district that Chicago Fed is the base of is most of Iowa, Wisconsin, Illinois, Indiana, Michigan. It's like heart of the Midwest. We have the highest manufacturing intensity of all the districts and by far the highest autos. Tariff exposure, there was a ranking of all the states' tariff exposure, and of the 7 most exposed states to tariffs, 4 of the 7 are in the 7th district because we got a lot of agriculture, we got a lot of manufacturing. Their hair was absolutely on fire in April, freaking out. if the rates are going to be this big, we're going to die. What are we going to do? It exceeds our entire margin. They just did not know what was going to happen. Then we sign a couple of deals. We exempt USMCA compliant goods. They kind of phased down the rates. And a lot of the businesses were less freaked out than they were in April. They said, it'll probably be okay. Now we're coming back to the beginning where we're inching them back up. And as I always say, it's worth remembering, imported goods are only 11% of GDP in the U.S. So if it stays in its lane, it doesn't have to be a macro massive impact. But how it jumps out of its lane, one of the ways is if you start applying big tariffs to intermediate goods and parts and supplies and components and stuff like that. Now you just transformed a tax on imported goods into a tax on domestic production. That's kind of started happening. We're going to up it on steel and aluminum. We're going to get in a bunch of retaliation on rare earth metals and magnets and things that go into the supply chain. So I would feels like a lot of business getting back nervous again. And normally, if you're trying to figure out where are you in the business cycle, you would kind of go look at the rate sensitive sectors and say, hey, if restrictive interest rates set by the Fed are driving slowdown, then the people who are most interest rate sensitive, they will probably be suffering the most. Kind of the three big ones are business investment, consumer durables, and housing construction. Or those are three of the most rate sensitive. Business investment is booming. Now, that's probably because of this AI and the data centers and stuff that has nothing to do with the interest rate. Okay, so that one's confusing, but it doesn't look like trouble. Consumer durables, surprisingly resilient. And so one of the things when we're out talking to the auto companies, there was a bunch of front running of the tariffs, and they thought then it was going to drop off, but it kind of hasn't dropped off. Consumer spending, as you know, has just kept chugging along. And then housing construction's been weak. So of the three rate sensitive ones, two of them don't look like there's much trouble, and one looks like there is some trouble. So again, it's a little confusing.
You got a tough job. There's a lot of variables there. Shifting gears a little bit, one of the other big storylines of this year has been about the pressure the administration has put on the Fed, from going after Lisa Cook to calling on Jerome Powell to step down. Fed independence has long been kind of the bedrock of the U.S. financial system. Why hasn't the market reacted more to some of these threats?
You got to tell me why the market reacts the way it does to all kind of stuff. I've been in the Fed it's going to be 3 years in January. Before I was ever at the Fed, I agreed with the virtually unanimous of all economists that you will ever talk to that central bank independence from political meddling and interference when setting the interest rate is extremely important. Every rich country of the world has that feature, and a lot of poor countries of the world do not have that feature. And that's not a coincidence. The unanimity of economists in favor of central bank independence from meddling is rooted in, just look at the places where they don't have it, or times even in this country where they don't have it. Inflation comes roaring back, and it's easy to understand why. If the sitting government can set the interest rate, they have incentives that are different than trying to prevent inflation from getting out of control.
So a lot of people listening to this hear us talk about the Fed meeting. You know, it happens a couple times every year, and y'all vote on an interest rate decision to make other economic forecasts. But it seems like such a black box to all of us. So if you could, I would love for you just to paint a picture of in 2 weeks.
Of what it is.
Yeah,
Yes.
What
look,
is it like?
I had never been there. Okay, but you guys, I'm like you. I'm an econ nerd my whole life. I got to tell you, it's about the coolest thing in the entire world. You go in, there's a giant room, a huge table, biggest table I've ever seen. Everybody sits around this table. shades come down. There's nobody can spy. You can't bring in a phone. You can't bring in. It's like being back in the Situation Room or something in the White House. And then the meetings start. The first 2 days meeting. Mm-hmm. First day is about the economy. Second day is about the rates and the vote. And they're going to go around the table. So Jay Powell's going to be like, here's what I think about the economy. And Governor Waller, he's going to say, here's what I think about the economy. And they're going to go around the table. And you can see the background of the people sitting around the table is very different. Business people, economists, lawyers, market people, there's a bunch. And it's fascinating. It's really fun to hear their view of the economy. I try to bring a little, little regional taunting to the thing. So I'll usually start by, here's why the 7th district is the greatest district in the nation. But they'll go through. It's more. Eventually, you'll be able to see word for word where they will release not just the minutes, but the actual transcript of what everyone said. And you'll see it is a little formal, but it's people take the job extremely seriously. And everybody speaks their piece, whether you're voting that meeting or not voting. And it's all about the economy, the economic outlook, and how they see the world. It's not about elections. It's not about politics, not about outside pressures. Everybody takes that job really seriously. And I say in 21st century, I think that's the world's greatest deliberative body. You can judge for yourself. People are very thoughtful.
How does the actual voting mechanic work? We were kind of joking that everyone puts their head down and put their thumbs up.
Yeah, no, we should see if we can innovate that. What happens is on rates day, everybody gives their opinion, and then they call the question. They will have outlined 3 alternatives: alternative A, B, and C, and they're loosely kind of a dovish alternative, a hawkish alternative, and then the alternative B, which is what we vote on. And that's the sense, and they just call out whoever are the voters. They'll be like, Governor Bowman, and they say yes or no. President Goolsbee, yes or no. President Daly, and they call out the 12, and that's the mechanic. And if somebody dissents, they'll just say no, and then I think there's some process of giving a rationale if you dissent.
Have they been more tense recently? Because there has been sort of disagreements between the Fed officials about how much we should cut rates, whether we should not cut rates at all. There was a double dissent a few meetings ago. So has that translated to maybe some more tense meetings recently than in your 3 years in this position?
Listen, the vibe of the room is not tense. It's like I say, people are there they have historically taken the job extremely seriously, and it's all about content. And if people disagree, I mean, you can see just from the public comments that the members of the committee make, they're coming from very different places. They're of different worldviews, but Chair Powell has been very good at, is it diplomacy, at kind of navigating a course that almost everybody can agree with almost all the time. And that's it's pretty impressive in an environment where we've had a lot of major things happen to be able to do that. I haven't detected it to be tense.
And what's he like as a leader? Like, is he someone who's more vocal, or is he you just kind of understand where he's coming from? Is he very data driven?
I have found him very data-driven. I didn't know him that well before I got to the FOMC. I've been really impressed. I mean, I said I thought he's a first ballot Hall of Fame Fed chair, and I have pretty high standards because Paul Volcker was my friend and mentor, and I worked through the financial crisis in 2008, 2009 with him. I'm not the rules of the FOMC communications policy. I'm only supposed to speak for myself on monetary matters, not for the Fed, not for anybody else or what they think. So I'm going to stay out of that. But I'll just say the guy's I found him very smart and persuasive, and he's had excellent intuition at several points along the way here.
Seems like a Tim Duncan kind of guy.
Yeah, just
Tim Duncan.
big fundamental.
I
Would
see.
you agree?
The big fundamental.
The big fundamental.
I grew up a Lakers fan, so I can't praise somebody that much for being a Tim Duncan-like
Speaking of Fed communication, Fed officials have to be very careful with their wording because what they say or even hint at has the power to move trillions of dollars in markets. So you're forced to adopt this Fed speak where you say something, but not really. Do they teach you how to speak Fed before you join?
No, I'll probably get myself in trouble anyway. But it can be overblown a little bit, especially the closer the argument gets to, well, the Fed needs to do X because that's what the market expects, and you can't disappoint the market from their expectations. Volcker used to tell me, the Fed's job is to act. The market's job is to react. And let's not get the order mixed up. And I kind of agree with that. I'm usually trying to just say, here's what I think. And I'm just one of 19 people sitting around the table, so the world can make of that what it wants.
Are the rumors true? Did you actually teach a class at UChicago on your wedding day in a full tuxedo?
I did. It was a Saturday. I had a Saturday class. And they made me. They assigned me the class. It was really low. It was only my second year, and it actually ended up working out okay because there wasn't that much for the groom to do on the morning of the wedding except just get nervous. So I went, and there's a picture of me teaching the thing. And I always say you can tell who's the University of Chicago people from not. A normal person looks at the picture and is like, you're teaching class in a tuxedo? And the Chicago people are like, that's the Monopoly markup formula, because that's what was like the learner index, formula. And we had a real class, like on
Saturday.
We did it.
Well, they say Chicago is where fun goes to die, but I did go there for one weekend, and I had some of the best nights.
It's
of my
where
life.
fun was born.
It's where fun was born. At least for the small
Yeah.
group of people that I was hanging out with. So Austin,
That's
thanks
right.
so much for joining us.
Guys, what a treat!
Yeah.
Thank you for having
learned
me.
so much, and good luck with everything in this data blackout, and we'll be following you and the rest of the Fed officials' movements over the next few weeks.
Great to see you.
Well, I never met someone as married to the game as Austin. I tell you what, I will not be potting in my tux on my wedding day. Hope you all enjoyed that interview as much as we did. Now let's sprint to the finish with some final headlines. Up first, big banks have clearly been hitting the gym because amidst all the uncertainty around tariffs and in the economy, they just keep getting swoller. Across earnings calls from JP Morgan, Bank of America, Goldman Sachs, Wells Fargo, and Citigroup, the through line was clear. We're doing all right. The investment banking divisions of Goldman had a great quarter because higher policy volatility can actually accelerate the sort of corporate wheeling and dealing that earns it fees. Citigroup had a 16% increase in profit, as it said the spending habits of consumers is holding up strong. Morgan Stanley had an especially standout quarter thanks to its stock traders, with revenue from that division jumping 35% to $4.1 billion, topping Goldman Sachs in the business that it traditionally dominates. Finally, Wells Fargo reported a 9% boost in profit on the backs of increased spending among its most affluent clients and lower income customers. But two truths can coexist here. Quarterly profits can be strong as stock trading and deal making resurges, but risk lights can also be blinking under the surface. Neal, some bank leaders are feeling uncomfortable with, one, the sheer length of this bull cycle, and two, some of the shenanigans going on in the private credit world where we've seen a couple of high profile collapses.
I think I know what bank leaders you're talking about, and it's Jamie Dimon, JP Morgan CEO, who's always ruffling some feathers. So the context here is we had two major blowups in the credit markets recently, two auto companies, First Brands and tricolor. And there's been a little bit of spookiness around whether this portends further collapses or some shakiness around capital markets. So Jamie Dimon, during JP Morgan's earnings call, goes up to the mic, goes up to the earnings call and says, "My antenna goes up when things like that happen." And by that, he's talking about these two big blowups. "I probably shouldn't say this, but when you see one cockroach, there are probably more." And this mention of cockroaches within the financial system attributed to private equity companies got a lot of pushback, and you saw asset managers and private equity giants from Apollo to Blackstone to other smaller companies push back on Jamie Dimon's comment saying, "Look, you guys were involved in the deal too. I think you need to look at your own books and not ascribe blame to us if you want to squash more bugs." So Jamie Dimon always, creating conversation. He always has a pretty dour outlook compared to the rest of the big bank CEOs. But overall, besides the cockroach comment, the six largest banks raked in almost $41 billion in profits in the past 3 months, which was up 19% from a year ago. They say that everything's pretty much smooth sailing on the economy, besides perhaps a few cockroaches we need to kill. All right, over in the AI world, everyone is talking about OpenAI's announcement on Tuesday to allow, quote, erotica for verified adult ChatGPT users, essentially meaning they can sext with the chatbot. People like Mark Cuban blasted the move, writing on X, "This is going to backfire hard. No parent is going to trust that their kids can't get through your age gating." Sam Altman, OpenAI CEO, responded on Wednesday that he was very surprised by the backlash, saying OpenAI is, quote, "not the elected moral police of the world," and clarified the erotica point was just one example of the company being able to safely relax more content restrictions because it has the tools to verify ages. Altman said this is, quote, "very much about the principle of treating adult users like adults."
Yeah, the comparison he drew was how society handles R-rated movies. They're not banned. That content is not necessarily banned. They are just age restricted. And he's saying we're doing the exact same thing here. We have the technology in place to verify a user's age. So we are not going to be this paternalistic figure and tell you how you can or cannot use his chatbot. Maybe he also sees what Elon Musk is doing with Grok and how it already allows explicit material and said maybe we want to be in line with that as well. He said it's not a growth hack. We're not doing this to get people addicted. We just don't want to be the moral police of the world. So we'll see how, one, the technology actually performs and if it can effectively age gate, because Mark Cuban is probably right. Kids find a way. They know how to get around these types of things. And then we'll also see if it is actually something that is a free speech kind of path that he is taking, or if it's something that he wants to have a stickier user base, which obviously, explicit and erotica content can lead to stickier users.
Finally, the proteinification of America shows no signs of letting up. This week, Pop-Tarts maker Kellanova announced Pop-Tarts Protein, a new version of the product coming in November that will contain 10 grams of protein per serving and come in 3 flavors: brown sugar, cinnamon, strawberry, and blueberry. Don't worry, there will still be plenty of sugar, 30 grams per serving, about 60% of the recommended daily intake. This is by no means a suddenly healthy snack, but with demand for processed foods slowing down dramatically, Pop-Tarts is hoping that infusing Jim Bro-approved protein into one of the more indulgent pantry staples will bring consumers back into the sprinkly, frosted fold. Other food giants are thinking along the same lines. Last week, Pepsi announced plans for a higher protein version of Doritos, containing about 2 grams per 11 chips. Companies are trying to not get flat-footed as the protein craze reaches new heights. According to Grandview Research, the global market for foods fortified with protein is expected to top $100 billion in the next 5 years, up from $67 billion in 2023. Toby, what in the world? Protein Pop-Tarts, protein Doritos. Snack makers want to have their cake and hope you eat it too.
Yeah, I think this is the path forward for snack makers, because as we are entering into a healthier era of snacking, the easiest way to keep the brands that people love but make them not feel as bad about it is just injecting little protein. I did see my timeline light up with some people loving this rollout, because as a runner, this is a great thing, because I used to eat Pop-Tarts before almost every single run. Now, if you add a little protein, you feel even better about doing it yourselves. They're not the only ones doing it either. You mentioned Doritos, but also Smucker's just released a high-protein version of Uncrustables that I am very excited for. That's got 12 grams of protein, so we're seeing a little war breakout here. Even, Khloe Kardashian rolled out her own protein popcorn with a little bit of protein in that as well. So clearly, this is the playbook that these brands are running. I also think about Starbucks adding its protein cold foam. Basically, you just add protein to everything these days. It begs the question, are we entering a protein bubble? And I have been hearing some inklings of that. So what is the thing just around the corner? Fiber might be the next thing where we see everyone re-injecting their foods with that. So the snack cycle just continues to turn. Right now we're in our protein era. Maybe the next era is fiber.
That is all the time we have. Thanks for starting your morning with us. Have a wonderful Thursday. If you missed Neal's numbers today, so did I. Got bumped by the Fed. But we'll do a special Friday edition tomorrow. If you have any feedback on today's episode, send a note to morningbrew@morningbrew.com. Let's roll the credits. Emily Milliron is our executive producer. Raymond Liu is our producer. Our associate producers are Olivia Graham and Olivia Lake. Hair and makeup is Protein Maxing. Devin Emery is our president, and our show is a production of Morning Brew.
Great show today, Neal. Let's run it back tomorrow.